Hello, everyone, and welcome to session one of AIP 2025. As I just mentioned, my name is Sarah, and I'm delighted to be chairing this panel, which brings together three thoughtful and distinctive presentations exploring how humans and other animals share and shape everyday environments. From spiritual cosmologies to city streets and tourism landscapes, this session invites us to think deeply about the ethics, tensions, and possibilities of multi-species domesticities and urban entanglements. We'll hear about the agency of animals in Daoist religious life, the dynamics of human-dog communication in urban China, and the ethics of rabbit care activism on a Japanese tourist island. Each presenter will have 15 minutes and will hold questions after each talk and perhaps have time for further discussion once all the talks have concluded. You're welcome to post comments and questions in the chat as we go. Okay, let's begin with our first speaker, who is Haojie Wu, also known as Lucky Wu, a PhD student and educator at Sichuan University, China. With over 2 decades of experience in animal welfare, she brings a rich background in education and advocacy. Her presentation is titled Between Divine Instruments and Instrumentalized Divinities, Rethinking Animal Roles in Daoist Practice Through a Multispecies Ethnography Perspective. Okay, over to you, Lucky.
Dear colleagues, good morning or good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining my presentation today. I would also like to thank to the AIP 2025 team for creating such a valuable and important platform for us for sharing our research. In brief, my presentation today will structured into 4 parts, and I will begin with the research background, then explain why I choose 抱朴子那篇 as my main textual field. Then core section will focus on the multiple roles that animals take in religion, Daoism, reflecting different relationship between animals and Daoist practitioners. Finally, I will conclude with some reflections. Daoism in Chinese we call it Daojiao, as a Chinese indigenous religion, originated in philosophical of Daojia. Prior to 20th century, traditional Chinese society did not draw a clear distinction between Daojiao, religious Daoism, and Daojia, philosophical Daoism. The two terms were often used interchangeably. Following the May 4th movement in 1919 and then influence of the Western thoughts, Chinese scholars gradually established a clear division. Feng Youlan, the renewed Chinese philosophy, published the book A Short History of Chinese Philosophy in 1948, reiterating the separation. He mentioned Daojia is a religion, Daojiao is a religion, and Daojia is a philosophy. But some scholars, such as Tang Yongtong and Tang Yingjie, transcended this binary, suggesting that Daoism as a religion is grounded upon Daoist philosophy. With the philosophical framework of Dao Fa Ziran, Dao follows nature. Daoist cosmology emphasizes the inherent qualities, essence, and rhythms of the natural world. Here, nature is different from the nature in a scientific context. It implies both respect for beings as they are reverence for the approaches and rules governing them. This is called Dao. For this reason, both Daojia and Daojia have been regarded as among the most animal-friendly philosophies and religions. Animals occupy a central place in Daoism cosmology and ritual practice. While scholars such as Li Pei have explored Daoist views on animals, few studies have examined in detail specific roles animals play across different contexts, or how practitioners interact with them. In particular, or how practitioners interact with them, in particular, how these interactions align with or contradict or the Daoist principle of 道法自然, or 以道观之物无贵贱, With Tao, no being is inherently noble or base. This deserves a closer research. Such critical perspective can also illuminate how human-animal relations enact with Daoist influence folk practitioners across China today. The presentation takes 抱朴子内篇 as its core text field through a multi-species ethnography perspective to examine the multiple roles of animals in Daoist world and their wider significance. About 抱朴子 composed by Ge Hong, an outstanding Daoist scholar, alchemist, and medical practitioners of Eastern Jin dynasty, is a foundational text of early Daoist cosmology. Ge Hong established a system Daoist framework centered on pursuit of Changsheng, immortality, and Chengxian, transcendent, which has a significant influence on later Daoist development. The text is divided into two parts. The 内篇 inner chapters, which emphasize Daoist philosophy, the reality of immortals and transcendent, and concentrate practices of self-cultivation, and 外篇 outer chapters focus on the political ideology and integration of Confucius ethics. This study focuses on the 内篇 both because it marks the early systematism of Daoist cosmology and because animals figure prominently as medicine, symbols, companions, and threats of cultivation. The 内篇 thus offers a rare textual field in which humans, animals, spirits, and cosmos coexist in a shared order, making it an invaluable resource for multi-species rereading of Daoist practice. Animals, whether mythical creatures such as dragons or phoenix, or real ones such as chicken, fish, sheep, cattle, and tiger, are deeply woven into contextual of Daoist cosmos and pursuit, cultivation, and immortality. Their roles may be grouped into several major dimensions. First, we'll look at the animals as sacralized beings. Li Pei observed that in Daoist thought, animals are spiritual lives based on close observation of animal forms and habits in nature. Daoist texts endows them with extraordinary powers and symbolic resources. For example, the 论仙卷 Transcendent Chapter affirms 未生必死而龟鹤长存 Life ends in death, yet tortoise and crane endure. 未生必死 in 对蜀卷 reply to the Folks chapter states 知龟鹤之侠兽故侠其导引以增年 knowing the long life of turtles and crane, one may imitate their movement to prolong one's years. Thus, turtles and cranes became symbols of longevity, featured in Daoist health regiments and iconographies. The mythical animal 碧玺 a turtle-bodied, dragon-headed creatures symbolize stability and endurance, often carved beneath steel or temple structures. Animals were not merely admired, but they were elevated to the rank of nature teachers. Over time, they became increasingly immortalized. Ge Hong recorded that 预测记, there's a 1,000-year-old tortoise with 5 colors, understanding human language, floating on lotus leaves, circling in a cloud, and the turtles has transformed. In the Daoist world, animals were also indispensable as monks of the immortals. For example, 马黄乘龙而行，子敬遇白鹤。Ma Huang rode a dragon, Zi Jing drove a white crane, or Qin Gao rode a red calf into the deep water. Such imaginary underscores animals as mediators between human and celestial worlds, vehicle of transcendence. In a Daoist worldview, certain animals have significant role and responsibilities. For instance, volume bird, the azure dragon, and the white tiger and black turtles have the tasks with guarding the south, east, west, and north directions. From a multi-species ethnography perspective, sacralization of animals involved two key tensions. First, otherness and instrumentalization. Animals are reviewed for cognitive human tasks, lack longevity, fight transformation. Yet in the immortal order, they are reduced to luxury roles as monks or pros, lacking subjectivity. Second, the system function. Their sacralization is not incidental but necessary for constructing the Daoist cosmos. Without these animals, the celestial world loses its symbolic coherence and is conjunctive of transportation system. Thus, animals are not mere decoration, but vital pillars of Daoist cosmology. And second role is about animals. Second is about animals as demonic, threatened, or ghost beings. In Daoist cosmology, recognize cultivation as a process of negotiating with diverse life forms and uncreating presence. Animals can appear as companion or adversaries. In Deng She Pian, the Ascent Mountain chapter, Gehong warns tigers, wolves, insects, birds, beasts, or ghost demons in the mountains. These are not just ecological hazards, but symbolic trails. One tale described Zhang Getai and Ou Gao meet a man in yellow silk. A mirror revealed him as merely an old deer in disgrace. Gehong stressed, knowing their name prevents their harm. Naming thus served as a form of control. Resolution with Mark Elvin's thesis on naming as mastering in ancient Chinese thoughts. Strategies for countering such threats ranged from talisman and auspicious timing to use of animal products like musk, eggs, or antelets. Animals therefore stimulously embodied danger and became protective resources. Multiple analysis highlights the ambivalence. Animals as both pillars, others, and tool for human transcendence. This dual role reflects the politics of species in Daoism, where animal co-constitutes the practice of cultivation, while remaining subordinate to human aims. A third role is animals as protected by percepts. Gehong's thoughts devote to acromy, acknowledge the immense cost of exterminating. In the wage chapter, he proposed an alternative: cultivate virtue or compassion. This ethical explicitly extended to animals, show mercy to beings, spare even the insects. Do not harm life with your hands. By contrast, hunting, breaking eggs, and burning forest in spring or summer were regarded as evil. Later, Daoist perspectives are confident this systematically. The 老君说180戒 180 precepts of Lord Lao prohibit harming any creature stepping on livestock or wiping animals. The upper clarity precepts banned frightening birds or killing worms. Some texts even forbidden spilling hot water on the ground for fear of injuring ants. From a multi-species view, such protections is conditional. Animals are safeguarded not for their own sake, but as a mirror for the practitioner's moral cultivation. They become ethical objects, benchmark of virtue, but not autonomous beings. Daoism thus grants animals a paradoxical status. temporarily shielded, yet still instrumentalized for human transcendence. The fourth is about the animals as ritual and alchemical resources. Despite this Daoist ethics and of compassion, ritual and alchemical practice frequently demanded animal participation. In the Xianyao chapter, Immortal Medicine, Gehong cataloged countless ingredients such as minerals, plants, and animals. The collection of stone mushrooms, for instance, required fasting, talisman, ritual offering of wine and meat, and the establishment of the altar. Animals were centered in many formulas, captured 10,000 of years of thoughts, or thousands of years of baths, were dried and powered to extended life tens of million years. The thousand-year tortoise had its shell washed in sheep blood, roasted and consumed, conferring a minimum of life. This practice reveal a task contradiction. While perhaps enjoy not killing, immortality pursuit demand animal sacrifice. Animals were alternatively treated as sacred lives and as consumable resources. Their roles shifting according to the needs of cultivation. The fifth role is as the differentiated and hierarchic beings. Transformation narrated in 内篇, pheasants into calms, sparrows into mussels, field mice into corners, cattle into tigers, affirmed the fluidity of boundaries between species, grounded the Daoism cosmology of shared origin. Yet Gehong also insists among living beings, none is more spiritual than human. Rotten might symbolize debasement, while dragons and phoenix were exacted as a species. This example exposes a value hierarchy embedded in language. Animals are not fully equal, but stratified. This reflects the culture and context of early Daoism, where ideals of cosmic equality coexisted with social hierarchies. Animals thus occupy an ambivalent position, simultaneously expression of cosmic unity and vehicle of human symbolic order. In conclusion, In conclusion, in Daoist practice, animals are never merely background figures. They are co-constructors of scared cosmos, occupying roles as teachers, threats, protectors, resources, and symbols. Yet across all roles runs a persistent tension. Sacralization coexists with instrumentalization. From a multi-species ethnography perspective, this tension reveals the depths and contradiction of Daoist human-animal relations. The ultimate goal of Changshen Chenxian, immortality and transcendent, inevitably subordinate animals to human pursuits. Still, Daoist imagination, through perspective, percepts, transformations, and sacralization, create a world in which humans and animals remain deeply entangled in the quest of transcendence. Yeah, this is my brief sharing of my recent research. Thank you so much. And here is my reference. Thank you.
So our next speaker in this session is Fiona. Fiona, I saw you were here. Yeah, I can see you. Fiona Ariana Sherman, a PhD student at Ritsumeikan Asia Pacific University in Japan. Fiona's research investigates animal welfare activism and multi-species sustainability. Her presentation is titled Pathways of Caring, Exploring the Intentions of Rabbit welfare activists on Okunoshima Island. Welcome, Fiona, and please go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you. Let me just share my screen real quick.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, then I'll begin. So hi everyone, my name is Fiona and I'm a PhD student at Rethinking Asia Pacific University. And today I'll be presenting a project that I'm currently working on with one of my research supervisors. Her name is Dr. Ryu Sui. And this project is about the rabbits of Okunoshima Island. I would like to emphasize that this research is still ongoing, so the final results are still in development. However, I think that the findings that we do have so far are quite interesting, and I really look forward to sharing this case with you all and hearing your thoughts in the end. So before I begin, I would just want to warn everyone that there's a brief discussion of animal cruelty and a little bit of rabbit death. And I also have a couple images on one of the slides that depict some rabbit injuries. These will all be very brief, but just please be aware that they are present in the presentation. So to begin, I would like to start by introducing you to the island. So tourism on Okunoshima Island initially began with the construction of the Kyukumura Hotel. So this hotel is really a staple of the island and the only hotel available on the island. So unless visitors really prefer to camp, they must stay at this hotel. Visitors tend to visit the island simply to enjoy nature, camp, enjoy recreational activities, but the island is also a historical site. It was previously used as an area to produce toxic gas during World War II and was known for being a historical site through which you could learn more about the war. However, if you've heard of the island, then you probably know it more by its famous name, which is Rabbit Island. And it has this name because it's currently home to hundreds of rabbits. It's really unclear how the rabbits first came to the island, but we do know that they were introduced by humans and that they've been there since approximately World War II. And despite their long history on the island, the interest in the rabbits is actually quite recent, particularly with foreign tourists. After a post about Rabbit Island went viral on social media, tourism in the area really surged, particularly from 2013. We had about 125,000 visitors, and then in 2017, it increased to 407,000. So this introduced a lot of new issues to the island. And there are many problems when it comes to the island. So concerning tourism, there's been an increase in detrimental behaviors, such as feeding the rabbits foods that are unnatural to their diets, placing food next to rabbit burrows, leaving food and trash behind, and accidental injuries when interacting with the rabbits. And additionally, the rabbits become somewhat dependent on the humans who feed them. So during the COVID pandemic, the island's tourism decreased, which meant that the rabbits were no longer receiving food from the tourists that were visiting. And according to the MOE, the Ministry of Environment, approximately half of the rabbits died during this time, decreasing the overall population from about 1,000 rabbits to 500 to 600. And these numbers are as of 2021. So while 1,000 rabbits on the island initially was a bit of an issue due to overpopulation and territorial disputes amongst the rabbits, the sudden decrease emphasizes a really separate issue, which is the issue of human dependency for the rabbits. And additionally, when the tourists visit, they often leave behind food or trash, which then attracts natural predators to the rabbits, such as wild boars, which you can see in the first image. And earlier this year, there was also an unfortunate incident where a man was repeatedly visiting Okunoshima and intentionally harming and killing over 80 rabbits. And he has since been detained and prosecuted for this case, but it really highlights how unregulated contact with the wild animals is really a major issue in this case. And outside of tourist interactions, there's also the issue of rabbit health. So many of the rabbits in these images are suffering from injuries, open wounds, illnesses, and or tumors. And in addition to these issues, Okunoshima is also really an interesting case study, as many of the volunteers regularly travel to the island specifically to support the rabbits. So we have people coming from all over Japan and in some cases outside of Japan to help come and take care of the rabbits. And this type of volunteer activism was really interesting to me, and I wanted to find out why they decide to volunteer, what their support really looks like, and what this type of activism means for the preservation of the islands and the rabbit inhabitants. So to gain a better perspective on this issue, we applied a few different data methods. So first, we identified people who are known to go to the island and interact with the rabbits regularly via social media platforms, and we looked at blogs, YouTube, X, Twitter, and Instagram. And through these platforms, we found a network of activists who each regularly share information or photos of the rabbits. The public accounts within this network were then subjected to a content analysis to discern how they commonly interact with the rabbits and how they communicate and spread information amongst themselves. We also distributed a survey via Microsoft Forms and specifically sent it to the activists we identified in our network. In addition to these steps, we also plan to conduct some live interviews. However, we would like to interview as many activists as we possibly can, but Japan notoriously has the issue where activists are found to be rather private and hesitant to engage in research activities. So even with the surveys, the responses are generally pretty limited and really difficult to obtain. It's especially difficult in this case too, as these volunteers are generally very, very private. So at this point, we have conducted a content analysis on about 17 accounts through the social networking sites, and it contains about 300 posts amongst these accounts. And we've also contacted about 74 participants, and unfortunately, at this time, we've only gathered about 6 survey responses. But we're still reaching out. We're trying to get some interviews, get more survey responses, and I recently found more activists within the network. So I've expanded our records to include these people, and I hope to expand on the content analysis soon. So while the collected data may seem minimal at this point, actually the findings have been quite interesting. So for instance, our findings show that the volunteers on Okunoshima have a tendency to sustain their activism over a really long period of time, with most activists attending to the island between 2 to 12 years. And when asked about why they first began volunteering, their answers really varied. So some simply stated that they started volunteering after visiting the island for the first time and just feeling the need to. Others noticed that there was abandoned food and a lack of a natural water source, and they decided that something needed to be done, and they wanted to be the person to do that. And then others stated that they just found out about the issues from other activists online. So we saw some sort of information sharing through online platforms, and then they decided to get involved. Additionally, these volunteers all visit the island quite frequently. At most, they visit the island weekly, while others come a couple times per year. Additionally, most of the online activists were also found to be posting about the island and the rabbits almost daily. So they'll post updates about the rabbit health or just photos from the island quite frequently. And the content analysis highlighted some really key categories that the activists tend to fall under, which I have divided into 3 sections and label as the information spreaders, the feeders, and the cute enthusiasts. So the information spreaders seem to be most interested in general animal welfare, and they often follow other animal welfare accounts, they reblog animal welfare content, and they share information about the issues on Okunoshima and how to visit the island while mitigating damage. The feeders are the people who visit the island and regularly post photos where they give the rabbits containers of food and water. And these people typically photograph the rabbits eating. And also interestingly, I found through the content analysis that a lot of these people who feed the rabbits also have pet rabbits of their own at home. And then finally, there are the cute enthusiasts who take photos of the rabbits consistently, and they largely avoid any of the visible injuries that the rabbits may have in these photos. So the pictures often look very idyllic and portray the cuteness of the rabbits over the reality of the island. The survey activists also largely explained how they engage in not only these activities, but also in collecting garbage that's left on the island and attempting to establish some sort of official regulations with the local officials. They also explained that they are most interested in preserving Okunoshima and preventing over-tourism, establishing regulations that will better protect the rabbits and minimize tourist damage, and alleviate some of the suffering that they've observed in the rabbits themselves. Unfortunately, there's also some issues within these activist efforts. So first, most of these activists are working very independently of each other for more or less the same goals. So they've identified issues with the management of the island and with the welfare of the animals, and they're working in their own ways to manage it. However, there's really little communication between them, and there's also really a distinct absence of an organized movement. So the results from their efforts are really minimal. And some of the activists are in communication and they share information in their online communities, or they'll post petitions advocating for changes. However, these efforts often fall on deaf ears as the tourists and the MOE are usually pretty unresponsive to the concerns that these activists are raising. Some of the activists may also disagree with how to protect the rabbits. So some may find it really irresponsible to feed the rabbits as they may receive foods that maybe are not digestible to the rabbits, or others may find it wrong to maybe remove the rabbits from the island to receive medical treatment as there's not really a veterinary clinic on the island. It seems that a unified effort in which the activists can all work together on an agreed upon goal and enforce consistent rules would really do a lot of good for the welfare of the rabbits overall. But at this time, it's not really there. So despite these issues, the case of volunteer activism on Okunoshima is still a very interesting case study for a few different reasons. So first, the activists on the island seem to be quite private and subtle in their actions compared to most animal welfare activists. They post information online and they create vlog type content. However, they largely seem to quietly care for the rabbits on their own, and they often avoid sharing any personal information about themselves or showing pictures of their faces. And this is really interesting in comparison to many other instances of animal welfare activists, even those in Japan, which would organize protests or maybe more aggressively target the issues that are presented to them. Another thing is that these activists are tourists themselves who regularly visit the island to care for the rabbits. So this signifies some sort of collective activism in which the individuals are each acting in a similar manner without really communicating with each other. And they're even going so far as to travel to care for the rabbits, sometimes very long distances to do so. The consistency in which they travel to the island, I think, is quite admirable, honestly. And third, the majority of the identified activists are focused on feeding the rabbits rather than treating their injuries or establishing maybe any long-term solutions. So once again, the repetitive actions and short-term solutions that feeding presents is really an interesting aspect of this case, which questions the longevity of the rabbit welfare and care. While each of these factors make for a really interesting case study, there are some questions that are kind of left unanswered. For instance, despite the long-term support of the activists, is this type of activism really sustainable for the island? What will happen once these people are unable to continue traveling to the island to care for the rabbits? And is it right for the rabbits to depend so heavily upon humans for water and food supply? As we saw during the COVID pandemic, it's not really a good thing for the rabbits as it will negatively impact them if these tourists are unable to visit. Additionally, is it right to treat the rabbits with medical care when the rabbits, while maybe not technically wild as they have been brought to the island by humans, they have been born on the island. So in all accounts, they should be considered wild in this case. So is it right to give them outside care or should they just be left to live naturally? Does providing water and collecting trash actually help the situation and improve animal welfare, or is it simply just a temporary solution to a problem that requires maybe a more radical approach? And realistically, these rabbits are treated as a tourist attraction to the island. So if they are so important to the survival of the island and the monetary income of the island, then maybe the rabbits should be cared for by more permanent measures and not just by volunteer support. And to establish this permanent support, we must ask how the activists, the Ministry of Environment, and tourists can work together to better coexist with the rabbits and mitigate the perpetuation of similar issues in the future. So as you can see, there are many unanswered questions in this case, but I hope with this research, maybe we can start to see how volunteer activism is applied in this case, and Okunoshima can receive more attention and maybe develop some more sustainable solutions to encourage a more symbiotic relationship between the human and rabbit inhabitants and visitors of the island. So thank you all for listening. If you have any questions or any comments that you would like to raise, I really appreciate hearing it. As I said, this is still a working project, so any comments are really appreciated. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and my name is Haojie. I'm a PhD student in Fudan University of Communication and Media Studies in China. Today, I will share my research about dog walking. Its name is Leash Media Interspecies Communication and Symbiosis in Chinese Urban Species. And this research comes from my master's thesis, so it's actually quite a large project. And considering the limited time today, I'll just give a brief overview of my main arguments. So to begin with, what is dog walking? In the first part, I'll talk about why I choose to study dog walking and how I approach it in my research. Actually, in China, And dogs have been kept as pets for a long time, but the widespread keeping of pet dogs by ordinary citizens really appeared with the process of modernization and urbanization. However, in China, there's a conflict between humans and dogs. Sometimes it's visible, sometimes hidden, but it's always there. Specifically, I'm talking about the conflict between some suburban residents and household pet dogs. On one side, there are incidents like dog bites or irresponsible dog keepers, and people argue that dogs and even their keepers should be more strictly controlled. On the other side, dogs face the risk of abuse or even poisoning and killing. Dog keepers or animal protection advocates argue that these people should be regulated instead through stronger animal protection laws. The paradox is that the struggle between them hasn't solved the conflict. It has only made it even worse. So why does this happen? In fact, this human-dog conflict in contemporary Chinese cities is most clearly seen in the everyday practice of dog walking. When dog keepers and pet dogs step out of their home and into gardens, parks, or streets, they are moving from private space into public space. This conflict between humans and dogs is therefore closely tied to the interspecies relationship of human space in China. So, I try to explore this issue in greater depth in a social science way. As mentioned before, my research field is communication and media. Actually, classic communication studies have mainly focused on human communication. Animals or non-humans are rarely considered as communication subjects or actors, even when there are even when they are included, it's only as representations or symbols or content, rather than as living, breathing beings. However, in recent years, with growing attention to the materiality of media, communication theory has begun to move beyond anthropocentrism, paying more attention to objects in between and their role of mediation. This theoretical turn aligns with broader shifts in humanities and the social sciences, all of which attempt to rethink our taking for granted realities from a deep-centric perspective. In anthropology, scholars have used the multi-species ethnography to bring non-humans back into academic attention. Anthropologists particularly focus on human-non-human relationships, producing numerous representative case studies that reconsider modes of interspecies existence. Just as Donna Haraway points out, the smallest unit for understanding humans and animals is relationship. However, there is still much confusion. Relationships between human and non-humans are not a vacuum. Perhaps the approach starting from mediation can help us to find solutions to end the problem of human-dog tension. So building on this, I conducted a broad field study observing dog keepers and pet dogs walking together in urban spaces and literally walking along with them. I also explore online spaces, collecting some moments of dog walking that dog keepers and pet-related influencers share on social media. And finally, I conducted interviews with some dog keepers. For me, all these dog keepers or pet dogs are my collaborators. They are not just the objects to be studied. Okay, here are the findings from my research on dog walking. Let's start with humans. In many cases, it is the dog keepers who control the leash and guide the dog's walks. I distinguish the behavior into two types, strong owner-centric and weak owner-centric. In the former type, dog keepers see themselves as the owners with the right to decide how the dog walks. In the latter type, dog keepers still control the leash, but more out of a caretaker mindset, trying to take care of the dog and prevent potential risks and conflicts. When we look closely at dog walking, we actually find that dogs are not always obedient. They often break free from humans' control, shifting the leadership of the walk from humans to themselves. In both field observations and interviews, I found that dogs employ four main strategies: pulling, tangling, weaving, and ignoring. When establishing new relationships, exploring new species, or encouraging or encountering new actors, challenging the dog keeper's control. For example, Shiba Inu, known as their stubborn temperament, often get tangled around street trees or lampposts, a situation dog keepers refer as the Shiba Triangle problem, in Chinese 柴三角难题. In this process, dogs exhibit what can be called some kind of a relational agency. Based on this, I argue that dog walking is actually a process of interspecies communication between dog keepers and their pet dogs. This process does not rely on language, rather it depends on a mediator that connects human and non-human bodies, the leash. This embodied form of communication generates interspecies affect between humans and dogs, blurring boundaries and ultimately forming a human leash dog assemblage. Just like the picture. Okay. Next, I want to bring more actors into the context of dog walking, expanding the perspective from the micro level interactions to the macro level of the whole city, like love of dogs, politics, pet economy, and pet-friendly culture. This allowed us to define the role of the leash as a mediator in another way. I found that the leash is actually ambiguous and elusive. It exists somewhere between connection and obstruction, visibility and invisibility. On the other hand, the leash helps dog keepers and pet dogs establish social relationships. The leash actually serves as a symbol of social connection, allowing both humans and dogs to overcome isolation and form social circles in modern cities. So they create a symmetrical network of social relationships. On the other hand, when the leash is absent or invisible, it becomes a focus of social conflict. From the 18th century to today, governors of modern and industrialized city have tried to use various artifacts or human-made tools to restrict the mobility of dogs, even the street dogs, such as muzzles and the leashes. In contemporary China, using a leash is considered a basic duty for dog walking, helping to prevent conflict between dogs, between dog keepers, and between dogs and humans. In other words, the leash is a politically charged intermediator. It is meant to suppress the animality of dogs, but this is not always successful. For pet dogs that live by the principle I sniff, there I am. They face only fragmented urban landscapes and untenable enrichment in cities filled with unfriendly species. Dog and dog keepers have nowhere to go and must find survival in these cracks. So this is some pictures about the leashes and the reminders of the leash for the dog keepers. Okay. So what does media means in this kind of content? Media refers to something that bridge connections and act as a mediator between binary oppressions. In dog walking practices, the leash plays precisely the role as an in-between mediator. And the mediation logic carried by the leash are not limited to dog walking. They can be extended to broader interspecies fields. The mechanism of the leash may be seen elsewhere as well. It coordinates human-non-human interactions, enabling freedom of connection while imposing constraints, mediating nature and culture, and blending them together. Therefore, media like the leash can serve as a crucial focus for understanding interspecies relationships. And I propose calling this kind of mediator leash media. Finally, Okay, this is a picture about the immediacy of Leash. Finally, I'd like to summarize these two strands of observation. My dog walking research does not center solely on either the dog keepers or their pets. Instead, it starts from the middle, identifying the leash as a key actor and following the traces to connect the broader interspecies world. The leash flattens the binaries of micro or macro structure and agency, power or resistance, allowing us through this lens of mediation to rethink the possibilities of interspecies communication and the coexistence or symbiosis in urban spaces. So when it's internal mediation, it corresponds to the macro level interactions and interspecies communication in the empirical material addressing ontological claims in multispecies and animal studies, and the other external mediation relating to the political and ethical experiences encountered as human-dog assemblage move through the city. In the first context of the leash, media visibly bridges human and dogs. In the second, there is also an invisible leash, shaping the construction of pet-friendly cities and interspecies justice. So in this sense, I also attempt to draw a normative conclusion from these empirical findings. In contemporary China, modern and industrialized cities built from concrete and steel offer extremely limited space for dogs and other non-human species to live freely. So if we want to create a dog-friendly city or more than human city, it requires not only an information-rich, communicative urban environment supported by ICT or AI or other technologies, but also we need a materially workable city. Achieving this goal cannot be done by tightening the leash. A taut leash fosters confrontation between humans and non-humans, only intensifying conflicts instead of improving the situation. What we need to create is a relaxed state of the leash media, allowing the mediation process to foster a world of non-humans and love. So, in a word, let's relax the leash and don't tighten it. And that's it. Thanks.